Hello everyone. Thank you. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Sorry, we're just 1 minute late, but I believe it's time now for us to start. And get into the topic of today, which is how to approach design in the context of data analysis. So as always, we want this webinar to be as interactive as possible. So please feel free to ask questions via the chat, and we'll try to keep some time at the end to answer as many as we can, or we'll make sure to get back to you on a one-on-one basis. A quick word about today's presenter. So we have Cordelia, who is part of our expert services team, and she will essentially show you how to apply some of the key design principle in a demo that will take place towards the end of the presentation. And then there's myself, Julian, who is in charge of MyJewel here in the UK. Before we start, I just wanted to give you a quick glance at what we'll cover into this webinar. So we'll briefly talk about MyJewel as a company, essentially telling you a bit more about who we are, what we do in the data space. We will then go over the key concept and principle around data design, making sure that you have the right reflexes in mind when building your data visualization. And finally, Cordelia will do a quick demo to show you how to apply some of those best practices that we're going to be addressing during the presentation. That being said, let's get started. So just a few words about MyJewel, and I'll be very brief. MyJewel is what we call a data pure player. We've been around for more than 12 years, and all of our expertise revolves around data and helping our customer create value from their data. And this translates into a number of things, like helping and choosing and implementing the right data and business intelligence solutions. It translates into project support or management, strategic consulting or advisory, training, and so on. The next aspect I want to mention is the data value lifecycle, which is how we approach data projects. And it represents all the steps and stages for creating value from data. We can summarize it into two main categories, which are data preparation on one side and data visualization on the other. And obviously, the goal of today is to focus on the data visualization side of things, which we have also kind of split into multiple fields or parts. And the reason for that is that you have to remember that not everyone consumes data in the same way, and therefore there's going to be multiple ways of representing data depending on your audience, on the environment, and of course the end goal or the objective of your dashboard or analysis. And all those things will have an impact on the design choices that you're going to have to make. So we have the more traditional reports and dashboards, and we can go to what we can call more advanced representation like storytelling or even data journalism, which is something that here at MyJewel we kind of have created, which is essentially combining storytelling with an editorial approach in the same technique that journalist uses. And the goal here is to emphasize a specific event or insight from what is usually starting with a complex or maybe a large data sets. So why talk about data design? And I wanted to start addressing the topic of data design by answering the question of why is it important? Why data design should be a priority? Why you should consider the design element as something as important as the analysis itself and not just an afterthought. And we need to answer what's at stake here. And if you think about dashboard and the fact that they're mostly intended to present information, to show trend, to update users on what happened, and maybe most importantly, how it needs to drive action, how it needs to help the user make the right decision, then you understand why this can only happen if the message is delivered, if you are able to drive adoption, and if you're able to draw attention at the right place, and essentially make it accessible to your audience. And focusing on the design element of your analysis or dashboard will help you achieve that. You will be able to, or you will need to appeal to the fact that most humans are visual learners, and that by using graphics, you will enhance the human ability to see patterns and trends. You will need to consider or address the variety of audience and environment, whether it is working on brand or your visual identity, or selecting the right delivery system, or add interactivity for the user. Those are the things that you need to think about, and this is how you're going to address the reason to develop your data design aspect of things. So we need to talk about your audience. And one of the first choices you are going to have to make when building your visualization is deciding on the size, meaning the format and the dimension. And this is important because it is directly correlated to your audience and the type of message or action you want to drive from them. It will ask you to think about the user, about how they consume information, and therefore the goal or the objective of your analysis or your dashboard. And there's going to be questions like, how will they access a dashboard, whether it's via a computer, whether it is via a web browser, a mobile, and so on. But also whether you want to create an operational dashboard or an analytical dashboard, and so on. And the answer to this question will dictate the overall format. Our recommendation here at MyJoule is that the width should most of the time be 1200 pixels, and that will most likely not change. However, the length will depend on the answer to this question that you've asked yourself previously, on the objective, the user, and how people will consume information. And you can categorize that in two main formats. The first one being a dashboard mode, which has the objective of giving an instant overview picture of a situation with all the information in one page. And the second format will be what we call a one-pager, which is giving the ability to the user to scroll down and therefore start with one information and then go down towards more details. And this mode tends to promote storytelling. If Cordelia will show you that during the demo, here's a quick example so that you can understand what I'm talking about. Here you have a first example of a dashboard mode with the idea of presenting the big picture around sales. And you're going to have in one view sales over time, sales by categories, and sales by countries, and so forth. So you're going to have that big picture. And the other example is a one-pager example, where you can see that there's going to be a more scripted version of the information, starting with some KPIs showing some values and trend, and then you're going to go down towards more details like objective attainment, like stock valuation, and so on. So those are the two different approaches which you'll need to think about when creating your visualization. And obviously, one of the first choice you're going to have to make when thinking about your audience and starting on your design journey. The other part I want to address is the type of graph and selecting essentially the right representation. It is the second and very important choice you're going to have to make when working on your design element. Is about selecting the right representation for your data. And this part is crucial because selecting the appropriate graph will help you convey the right message or idea to your user. And sometimes failing to do so can actually have the reverse objective, the reverse aspect, which is confusing your user and maybe leading to misinterpretation. And we understand that this can be quite a challenging task. And I think one of the first recommendations that we want to make is that you shouldn't be afraid of trying various options to see what works, what's best, and testing the water. But we can also ask some. You can also ask yourself some question to help you choose which type of chart is the best one. Questions like how many variables you want to show in a single chart. How do you want to display values over a period of time, or among items or groups? How many data points are needed to display for each variable? Those kind of questions. And this will help you choose among the three main type of representation that you have, which is comparison, where essentially you want to compare data, you want to compare several values between them. Those are your line charts, your bar diagram, and so forth. You're going to have another family, which is composition. So the idea to show how individual parts make up for the whole. So essentially highlighting the significance of each part relative to maybe the total value. Those are your donuts, your tree map, and so forth. And finally, the last family is distribution. So distribution charts will help you illustrate outliers, trends, or the range of information within your values. So this is the following questions that this next question that you're going to have to ask yourself when building your visualization. Do I want to show a comparison, a composition, or a distribution? However, the choice doesn't always stop there because within those main families of representation, there's going to be a lot of different type of charts to choose from. And once again, one of the recommendation that we say to our customer is you're going to have to do some trial and error, see which one works best. So quickly, so in the comparisons aspect, there's going to be the bar charts, where it's very easy to understand and compare and see the repetition in activity. There's going to be an example of a donut here, where you want to see an overview. For instance, you're going to have an overview of your turnover and how it is split. But you don't really want to compare it to other values. You want to see and look at what it is made of. Or an example of a distribution chart with maybe a little bit more complex diagram here, which is a Sankey diagram, which is essentially a flow diagram to see the relationship between values, with the idea of emphasizing proportionality. So for example, to identify the biggest contributor here. So those are the questions that you're going to have to ask yourself, and the second choice that you're going to have to make when building your visualization. The next part I want to discuss is the user experience, or UX, which is something that we often hear about. And building an effective dashboard requires you to understand how the user is going to read and interact with the information, making sure that he's able to find the right information at the right time. And that comes down to defining essentially visual markers so that the human eyes can easily read and, of course, retain information. And there's three main concepts that we always want to address when we talk about UX, that we always want you to keep in mind. And the first one is the flow of reading. And we often talk about the F patterns, meaning a reading order from left to right and from up to down. The other concept that I want to highlight is the layout, that you need to think about to make it visual and, of course, functional. And we're talking here about margin, about spaces, and those kind of aspects. And the third one is the storytelling aspect of things. You have to acknowledge the fact that the brain need to make connection and links. And he likes to do that, and that's how he's going to retain information. So taking that in consideration, you're going to have to, as I mentioned, focus on designing a visual layout. And when we talk about UX and designing layout, there are three main principles or laws that you need to keep in mind and know about. The first one is Gestalt law, which is essentially telling us about how humans perceive visual elements and how we like to group things. The other one is Fitts law, which kind of adds the notion of time when you interact with something. And there's a third law, which we'll talk in a second. But what we have here is an example of a layout using the F patterns, and that kind of highlight those different laws. So we're gonna find on the top a text box with the title, and that's important because it gives context. But what you can also see is that it's positioned in a dominant space. So that adds to storytelling, to providing visual layouts, and to once again have that context for the dashboard. Another area with the first bar of the IP is where you'll find some sort of summary or high level information. That's the second or third kind of information that one person will read. And then you're going to go down and potentially scroll down to get more information or details about the analysis. And what we need to highlight here is that this is something very natural. Our brain understand and accept this approach easily, and it will make it easier for the reader to screen the information and once again to retain that information. So the third law that I wanted to highlight here, and is very important to consider when working on the UX of a data visualization. And the key principle here is to consider the time it takes to make a decision and how this is impacted by the number of options essentially you give to the user. And that comes back to the importance of an understanding that not everyone will consume information in the same way. So with that in mind, it is important to offer some degree of interactivity and personalization, but for example, with the example of giving some filters option. But what tells us the Hicks law is that we need to be aware of the number of options and how this will impact the user experience and therefore the efficiency. So we need to give options, but not drown the user in options. And those are the examples here. So you see, for instance, a complicated filter on the left with a lot of options. Then you have a little bit better display of options, but it adds an extra layer or an extra action with a scroll down. And then a third option, which might be the best one, which is the simpler one or the one on the right, where you're going to group some options together and making the key information more accessible, easy to perform. The Hicks law, so the same concept applies when addressing the navigation or action aspect of your dashboard. You might want to, clicking on a chart can sometimes add another, can update another charts, or click on a navigation button can lead you to another dashboard. And those are actions that you might want to add to your visualization. But the Hicks law tells you that you need to be careful that the context of the dashboard and the information you have at that time is coherent, that the user always know where he is and how he got there. So this is something that you need to think about. The last part I want to address is the visual identity or feel of a data visualization. And I will go over this part quite quickly, not because it's not important, but because we are usually more familiar with it. And it's an easier to understand kind of concepts. We live in a society that's highly focused on aesthetics, and therefore we need to address areas like fonts, color palettes, and other visual cues, which plays an integral part of a visualization. And the first one is typography, like choosing the right font. And we're all quite familiar with fonts. We've been playing with that for a long time when working on Excel, on Words. And the fact is that font will play a role in the overall readability, speed, and efficiency at which the user will read the information. So you have to pay attention of how easy the font is to read and what emotion it will convey. And of course, you can combine fonts together, but you just have to make sure that they work well together. So here we have an example of Robotos Lab works well with OpenSense. The other visual identity aspect that you need to focus on is the color palette. It is something that you need to consider, as this will have also a big impact on the feel of the dashboard and how the user will perceive the information. So in this example, for instance, we have chosen a color palette that combines different colors to give a vintage effect. And this is something that once again, you can consider when building your visualization. Finally, I want to talk about dividers and icons. These can be quite powerful to indicate to the reader what to do or provide context. So in this example, for instance, we have on the left side a dashboard with the divider in the form of an arrow, which essentially tells us to go down. And that kind of, so there's a number of type of dividers which can show momentum, can add dynamism to the dashboards. And then we have also the use of icons. In this case, we can see that there's bars and euro signs. So instantly, it tells us that we're going to compare monetary values. So those are quite powerful to use as well in your dashboard. So that being said, I'm going to pass on to Cordelia, who's going to kind of show you how to apply those concepts during a demo. Cordelia, it's up to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Julien, for this very interesting presentation. Hello, everyone. So let me share my screen. Here we are. Up. So hello, everyone. Thank you, Julien, for this very interesting presentation. In this part, we will work on the commercial business analysis of a company named SportUp. This is, so if you can see my screen, this is the dashboard that has been created by SportUp. And well, at first glance, we can spot a couple of math practices that makes the dashboard not really readable. So let's take a closer look. First of all, about titles. There is no big title, so we don't really know what will the dashboard talk about. And again, with smaller titles, there are only two graphs over here, sales map and sales evolutions. So only two graphs that have titles, but all the others have none. And well, those ones are not really being effectively enhanced. So this will make it very difficult to understand and analyze the graph without any more information. So, for example, what are the measures we're comparing? How is the measure in this donut distributed? And first of all, which measure? So, well, let's talk now about user experience. All the graphs are all just put like this on the dashboard. There's not really a real narrative. There's no storytelling to help the user understand how to analyze the data. All the graphs are all gathered here and there. There is no space between them. It makes the view very heavy and hard for the eye to know where to go, what to read, and how to read it. There are not really filters. There's just only one here. It's not really a strategic place. It's on the map. It's pretty difficult. Well, that's it for it. Let's stop here. In conclusion, this dashboard is not really simple to read and definitely not simple to understand. Through Julien's explanations, the question is here: how to improve and help in decision making thanks to the techniques we heard earlier, and how to apply these principles in order to improve the dashboard's ergonomy and the relevance of our data. So here is a template of a new version. It's a new version of the dashboard, but it's not perfect. And first we're going to go through all the changes we've made on the dashboard, and then we will spot some graphs or some little things that we have to change. And we're going to do it together in order to finish this dashboard all together. But first, let's look at what has changed. First, you can see that we've chosen to go on a one-page version in order to get a real storytelling view, going from the top with an overview of our KPIs and then scrolling down, going through more detailed views of them. On the top left corner, we've added the company's logo, And just on its right, we've added a big title to let the user know what's the dashboard about. So the dashboard is about commercial business analysis. A little reminder, as for the user experience, we work on the reading pattern in F. So all the filters are on the left side of the dashboard. And since intuitively we are reading from the left to the right, it makes sense to have the filter corresponding with the graph that can have a meaning. So here we have a filter by selecting a country, and we have a map on the right. And again, here we have the sales distributed by categories, products, and we have the filter on the left that allows us to filter the graph. All parts have big titles, and hence with a blue background. And all the details we need to understand the analysis is in the different white dividers. Another thing we added is what I call text box informations and subtitles. This is, for example, this one. We can have another one over here. This way, we have a means to add information that can help the user understand how to analyze the graph and have more information that we cannot put on the graph. Last but not least, we've added some pictograms, so some small images all across the dashboard. Pictograms are really important because they catches the eye of the user and help them understand the graph's information and how to analyze the data from the graph. For example, well, this one allows us to know what are the two graphs talking about. And moreover, we added also a legends within the donuts, legend with arrows to guide the user in order to understand the different donut shares. Here are the different categories of products such like bags, component, clothing, and accessories. And those were not, for example, on the previous dashboard. We had two donuts. We didn't know what was the measure, what were those shares about. Different bikes, seems to be some kind of bikes, different types of bikes. Don't really know what it is about. So adding all those added information really helps the user to understand. Again, on the donut, we've added in the middle of it the total amount of sales.
So this is what happens during a live demo, obviously. But I think we were coming to an end with Cordelia's demo. So thank you.
I'm so sorry. So sorry. I'm so sorry. My computer just shut off without saying. So maybe you want me to go back to the demo.
Yeah, but well, yeah, go for it. Go for it. Share it.
Okay, so I'm so sorry about that. Okay, so we were on the middle of the donut, the 30 millions. Where are the 30 millions going? The main point of adding in the middle the total sales amount is to allow the user to know how these 30 millions are distributed between all the different categories of products. So moving on. So in the storytelling part, we have at the very top of the dashboard the two main figures of the dashboard: totals of sales and benefits. They're pretty big, and they have a title, so we don't mix apples and oranges. These figures are the ones the user wants to see in a commercial business analysis. The question now is, how are these figures distributed geographically? So, for instance, we can use a map. How are these figures distributed by category? The donuts we talked about. And how do you think the annual provision is going to be? Now, if we go a little more precisely individually in the different dividers, there are some things that don't really work. They're not optimum, and we are going to work on that all together. So, the interesting part, which graph to choose for analysis? That's the ultimate question. Let's take this map as a first example about the geographic distribution. Covering the different countries doesn't really help the user to understand the measure we want to analyze. That can be the total sales amount or the benefits. But if we change the coloring to a bubble shape, where the size is related to a measure value, that could be a game change. So let's do it. So I'm going into the sheet, changing just the mark into circle, and here we are. Now we can obviously see at first sight that the United States over here is the country where there's the most activity. Well, and although here we can literally see that the bubbles are more suitable than calling countries. Moreover, we have a little subtitle that I talked about earlier in the demo, and this little info tells us that SportUp has just opened a new store in Canada. This information paired with the bubble size shows us that the Canada branch has a great activity, although it has been newly opened. So that's the kind of information a subtitles can bring to the user. Now we're going to look and focus on what I call color consistency. Thanks to the company corporate identity guidelines, we have already worked on a consistent palette of colors that we apply to all the dashboard. Well, not to all. The last graph over here, the annual provision, is not appropriate. It doesn't abide to the company's geographic rules. So we are going to change that and make it right. Let's go into the graph. Let's edit the colors. So we have a palette that we named Purp Rain, and I simply click on Assign Palette, and here we are. We have color consistency. We have the same kind of shades from the rest of the graph, and that's all by just assigning the palette categories. The different part of the pictograms over here and the text box information allows us to understand what is the graph about and how to read it. And the last one over here is simply to tell the user what strategic decision has been made since we've been from the top of the dashboard, the overview of the KPIs, to a more detailed view. So now we can make a strategic decision. And this is quality before quantity. Sorry. So, in conclusion of this demo, what are the topics we've used here to have a better dashboard than the previous? First, dimensions. In order to implement a storytelling and a narrative with all those graphs, we went to a one-page version, going from the overview at the top of the dashboard to a detailed analysis through the dashboards down to the bottom. Second point, graph types. In order to add more value with the measure than only with dimensions, hence the map. And third, the user experience. We used filters on the left to invite the user to go to more relevant informations, and those filters are related to the graphs on their right. Using titles, subtitles, and pictograms, as well as text-added information, in order to guide the user in his journey into the dashboard and in the data analysis. And finally, fourth and last point, visual universe. We use dividers, the same typography all through the dashboard, and the same color palette to ease readability and have consistency across all the dashboards. So that's it for the demo. Julien, I give you the mic back to end this presentation.
Thank you very much, Cordelia. So we'll just put the presentation back. Yeah, thank you for this summary, and thank you everyone. So if so I'm looking at the questions. So there's not that many questions. There's one question about adding interactivity to graph, if that's something it is possible or not. I'm gonna say, I mean, Claudia, you can intervene, or I know that for a fact that it is something you can do. Just keep in mind, you know, coming back to Hicks' law, you have to make sure, you have to be careful in terms of, you know, making sure that the context is always coherent. But it's definitely something you can do. We will share the recording, and so you might have noticed today we've used Tableau software for creating the data visualization. Now, those principles and concepts can of course be applied to any data visualization tool that you use, but because we've done that with Tableau, we are going to publish this dashboard, and as well as the data journalism data visualization that we've done on Tableau Public for you to review, and you can even download and play with it. That being said, I wanted to finish by telling you about our free help desk hour, where essentially you can have a one-on-one chat with one of our consultants and get support maybe on designing or improving some design element of your dashboard. Some of you ask questions around how to create a Sankey diagram. So this is definitely something that we could potentially help you on the one-on-one. It will definitely be a bit more complicated to do that over a Q&A. So please don't hesitate to contact us. It's completely free. So again, this is the end of today's webinar. Thank you very, very much for participating. We hope that you got some value out of this. Apologies for the quick technical issue, but this is what happens when you do things live. And if you're interested in learning more about Module, how we can help on some of your project, or maybe training, just feel free to contact us and follow us on Twitter, LinkedIn, and so forth. Again, thank you again for following, and have a great day.